what does it mean when there is a small-tsu at the end of a sentence in manga and there's no hiragana character that comes after it? When I first started reading manga in Japanese, that really tripped me up. I had no idea how that was pronounced or what that was or why that was. Sometimes I would also see a small-tsu just kind of isolated by itself in dialogue and there's nothing around it, and I didn't know what that was either. So if you're struggling with the same question, I'm here to explain that to you. So I sadly don't actually translate manga professionally. I say sadly because manga is my favorite medium of Japanese entertainment. I guzzle manga down. I used to anyway. Like, I still have like a collection of 200 or 300 volumes of manga, but it used to be 1,000 or so. I've been selling a lot of it. But yeah, manga's great and I really love it. This series in particular is one of my favorite, Ayashi no Seres by Wataseyu. Check it out if you haven't already. It exists in English if you don't want to read it in Japanese. But anyway, yeah, this page has a few examples. Right here, Yuhi is saying, "Speed o otose," and then there's a small tsu at the end of that. Later on, when Q brings the car to a screeching halt, and they don't die, Yuhi says, "Whew," and then there's a small tsu after that. So what a small tsu functions as is it's a glottal stop. So if you are a singer or if you've had any kind of vocal training, you'll know a glottal stop is this thing that's back in your throat. And it's the difference between ah, that just kind of trails off, and ah, like it has this sort of ending to it. It's really that that's in the back of your throat. So if a small tsu is in a Japanese word, like let's say the word datta, it's not data. If it were data, then there would be no small tsu between the da and the ta. But if you have a small tsu between that, it shows that there's a pause between the da and the ta. So data becomes datta. So if there's a small tsu just hanging out at the end of an exclamation or a word, and there's nothing else that comes after that, basically what that is you're still putting your throat and your tongue in that position as if another character was gonna come after that, but then it doesn't. So it's like da, oh, ooh. So instead of like, ooh, like with an exclamation point, it can be or ah. It has just that glottal finish to it instead of this ah, sort of like, softer finish to what you're saying. So if you want a sharp, sudden glottal ending to whatever you're saying, you add that small tsu. So now you know whenever you're reading manga, if a character is saying something and then it ends in a small tsu, you can kind of think of it as an exclamation point, but basically just think of it as whatever that person is saying, they sharply cut off. So now what does it mean if there is just a small tsu and nothing else in the dialogue? So as I said, a small tsu basically represents a glottal stop. It represents a sort of sound. You can sort of approximate that with like the letters and when I'm translating this in otome games, like a lot of times a character will just say small tsu, that's all they'll say. It depends on the context. If they're saying just a small tsu because they were punched in the stomach or they're in pain, somehow that's a very common time in which a character will just say small tsu. It's more like a grunt. So I might translate that as a double M with an exclamation point. I might translate that as an HM with an exclamation point. I might translate that as an oof with an exclamation point. But then sometimes the character says small tsu if they're crying. It'll especially be like, it'll be something like small tsu ... That kind of represents crying when a person's going kind of like that. It's not these like sounds that you can really write out with letters, either hiragana or romaji. It's like sniffles and like grunts while a person is crying. So in that case, I'll go something like o ... o ... or o ... exclamation point, HM exclamation point, o ... to just kind of show that that person is crying. Sometimes I've seen, like when I'm translating a project with a group of people and one of the other translators was translating something, this is happening in a game that I'm doing right now. I'm doing the from his perspective version of the Ultimate game. Usually it's from MC, the female's perspective, but then they release certain routes where it's from the guy's perspective, the love interest perspective. Anyway, so I'm translating the guy perspective version of this game. So there's already a translation of the main story out, and I'm looking at the translations by the original translator, and this translator will actually write out sob SOB, like when a character is sobbing. I don't know how I really feel about that. Like, I feel like that kind of works in a comic when you have like the little like, you know, spiky outlined thing, and then you have sob in there. It's sort of Batman-y, but it kind of works. It's like, okay, sound effect for crying. But if it's in a speech bubble of like a character is saying it, I feel like it's kind of weird to write sob. It would be like if the character were like, sob, sob. It's like, who says that when they're crying? But it is a dilemma. It is kind of hard to translate those things because it's just a sound effect, really, when it all comes down to it. So hope that this was a little illuminating on what small-tsu by itself or at the end of a word or a sentence means. Thank you to all of my lovely patrons who made this video and other videos possible. If you want to learn more about Japanese and how it works in translating anime and such, I got all sorts of playlists on this channel. Check it all out. You know how YouTube works. Anyway, bye.